Everyone. We have a few slides that I want to share with you. The first is right there. Our Synod budget. I want to say just a few things before we get to the numbers, and the first word is our. What I tend to find out is whenever money is on the table, people get weird. I love playing pinochle. I do not play for money because as soon as a penny is on the table, I play differently. We've been having a marvelous experience here about the ministry that takes place through the Southeastern Pennsylvania Synod and the ELCA. But as soon as money comes on the table, we forget it is our Synod budget. And we start saying, they want my money. So just a few things. Our Synod budget. What is a budget? A plan for how we will use our resources. Whoops, went too far. A representation of what is important to us. A reflection of people and the lives we touch. Mitt Romney got in a lot of trouble in the campaign when he said corporations are people too. Our budgets are reflections of people whom we touch. And, whoops, got to learn how to single click. And we are Synod. I grew up in the upstate New York Synod, and Reverend Dr. Edward Kirsten Perry was the bishop there for about 100 years. It was said of Dr. Perry that when the Lutheran Church is no more, there will still be upstate New York Synod and Ed Perry as its bishop. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Ed has gone to be with the Lord, and the upstate New York Synod still exists. But one thing he used to say all the time, is Synod is soon hodos. Greek words together, hodos, the road or the way, soon, together. We are on the road together, or as Judith Roberts pointed out, we are church together. So that is what we are when we are talking about the Synod. Where does the money go? First off, hopefully from your pocket. Hopefully to the plate. And if you're really advanced, maybe you've got one of these in your church. Or my personal favorite, I want to be at this church. I do not know whether that actually belongs to Christ, a division of Wachovia Bank or not. Online giving, however it is, when it comes in, where does it go? Well, we know where it goes. Most of it stays home. And it covers your pastor and your staff and your building and your lights and your insurance. And hopefully, we remember the main reason why we have those buildings for Sunday school and Vacation Bible School and youth ministry and women of the ELCA and feeding programs and all the things that we do in ministry to make Jesus known. Most of it stays home. Hopefully, not all of it stays home. And we hope that at least 10% goes beyond your congregation to the broader church. And when 10 or more percent goes to the broader church, half of that, as you heard earlier in Janet's report, 50% of that goes to the church-wide expression of the church, and 50% stays here in our Synod. And yet stays is kind of a strange word because it doesn't stay anywhere. It goes and touches people. What does it do? It supports our bishop and our staff and the building and the lights and Sunday school and Bible studies and the things that we do. But it also, this is just a few. You've heard hundreds of ways in which your money makes a difference in the lives of people. One of my favorites, 150th anniversary of the Philadelphia Seminary. And we've been raising money for that, for the Leadership Fund. While it's 150 years old and it looks like a museum, it is not. There are living, breathing people learning how to tell the story of Jesus and learning to do God's work with our hands at the seminary and at all our seminaries and all the places. Some things we didn't mention, or I don't remember hearing mentioned. How many make quilts for Lutheran World Relief? It goes out. The malaria campaign was briefly mentioned. ELCA World Hunger. Our church does a tremendous amount of work when the money comes out of our pockets and gets sent on to the broader church. Locally, we've been talking about such things as Romhurst Turning Point, and the tremendous work they're doing there. There are so many things that are going on. This is only a couple. The Welcome Church, a church without walls, we've been celebrating. Church without walls. And Pastor Violet Little and all the work that she has done. One thing that has not been said, and all the kudos we've given to her this year at the Lutheran Theological Seminary at Philadelphia, she was awarded the Distinguished Alumnus Award for distinguished service in the church. This doesn't happen on its own. It happens as our work goes forward, as God's work goes forward in our hands. We've been talking about these selfies, and I love when Bishop Hansen had us all hold our hands up and everything, right? One of the things that I think is interesting is, do you see what this is? It's an iPhone. This is different from an Android phone. An Android phone is not quite as cool. But one of the things about... Here's confession, Android. I have an iPod. The thing the iPod does, it's a very curious thing. Which way is that camera facing? On the iPod, you can push a button and you can take a selfie, or you can take a picture of you. When we look at our budget, I think it's great to think about our hands and our feet and where they have been and where they are going. But I think when we think of our budget, we have to think about what picture are we seeing out there of what we need to do. Which brings me to this, the hands that we have. Is that hand putting that $100 bill in the pocket or taking it out of the pocket? Now we get the money, so don't get weird. As we think about the ways in which our money goes to touch people, here is a very brief summation of what you have in the Treasurer's Report and Budget Report, Report of the Treasurer and Budget Proposal with all the detail in there. I thought it helped me to see in one place how it comes out. In general, we have those numbers there. I got to find my cheat sheet here. There we are. One of the things about our general income is, for the first time, as was mentioned earlier, we did not go down in what we received from congregations. It was wonderful. Dr. Wesch, one of the members of the Finance Committee, has tracked this, and on average we've gone down 4% in giving every year since, I think, the mid-'80s. And that's in real dollars, not in adjusted inflation dollars. And so we've had to do more with less. And as Bishop has said, we've restructured, we've cut staff, we've empowered, we've sent out. We've gone down to the bare minimum of where we can cut, and thanks be to God, we also seem to have bottomed out in where we were losing money. We stayed the same. So when we went forward for the next year's budget, we didn't plan a decrease in giving, but we also didn't plan an increase. We are hoping you will at least keep steady as we go forward. We would love it if you also start increasing. At the moment, we at least planned to keep our congregational attendance, based on what you pledged and based on our machinations of how we figure out what you haven't said. We've kept it the same as what we received for the past year as we go forward to 2015. We've also kept our expenses fairly level. The one difference that I want to highlight is, finally, after 7 years without a single bit of increase or thank you to our staff, we are giving incredibly modest thank you increases to the staff, but we're giving something today. Thank you for all the work they've done, for all the time they've put in. The temporarily restricted, Janet had pointed out that we receive money for registrations, for youth events, for Bishop's Convocation, for Synod Assembly, and what have you. We make a guesstimate on what it will cost, and we hope we will break even, and fortunately, sometimes we actually get a little in extra. We also get some other money come in and go out, but that number comes out fairly close as well. There is a slight surplus that we think might come in from all those things that we come to expect. We budget so as that we don't get caught short. But if there's a little extra, that can go to the general coffer. Mission, this is the that deals with the exciting, and new and innovative. I want to be very careful I say this because Bishop Burkhead is very clear that everything we do here is mission, and it is. And without the general expenses, in which we have our mission support to the ELCA, that top line, that $2 million line, has 50% of that, what we receive from congregations goes on. So it is mission in every line. But in the mission line, we have such things as the Welcome Church and Ronhurst and the Korean ministry and all these things that we do there. What you will see there is that one, we anticipate receiving 210, but we already have plans that will cost us close to $500,000. The restricted part, those funds that Janet had mentioned, they're given for candidacy, for youth ministry, for specific things. The money that's generated from those funds can only be used for those things. When you add it all together, we anticipate for the 2015 year $2,900,000, but we anticipate expenses of $3,100,000, or a shortfall of $224,000. Now, there is good news on this, and there is good news on this. The good news is we do not expect to fall short and not be able to pay anything. With all the restructuring that we have done in the Synod, with the reductions in staff and the farming out of part-time work with deans and others who are taking small chunks of the pie, and the teams that we have, the monies that we are receiving cover all our regular operating expenses and cover about half of these extra exciting, important ministries that we do in mission. We have stopped the bleeding. When you see $224,600 shortfall, there is money for that. Some of that will come from restricted funds that are there for that purpose, for candidacy and for youth ministry. And so we will use some of those funds that were given for that to help close a part of that gap. The remainder will need to come from the Fund for Mission, which was set up to fund mission. So it's not a horrible thing if we use some of that to fund our mission. A number of years ago, we had a Time to Act appeal, and we raised a bunch of money in order to do mission. Well, we didn't raise it in order to just make it the First National Bank of Southeastern Pennsylvania sit and see how much money we could gather. We did it to make mission happen. Currently, in the Fund for Mission, we have about $500,000. Some of that came from the sale of St. Luke Dublin. This is always a strange thing when we have to sell a property. There are a lot of people who don't understand, and a lot of people who grieve the loss of that property and that church, which I understand. I used to be the dean of Upper Bucks, and St. Luke's Dublin closing and being sold is sad for me. And yet, what we have said is that we do have a plan for what we do when a congregation comes to the end of its lifespan. And what we said is we want that money to be able to be used for mission. And so, at the unfortunate time that a congregation does come to the end of its life, we as the Synod receive that estate in trust. People say, oh, they just want to close Synod's congregations so they can get the money. Well, when we receive that estate in trust, you've got to remember, if you've ever been through an estate, you get all the assets and all the liabilities. We do not look to close congregations to close the budget. We do more mission when more congregations are open and viable. But there are times when congregations come to the end of that lifespan and they transition to a different kind of ministry. So what we do when a congregation closes, we sell the property as we are able, and with the latest whole recession and economic time, we've had 5 properties that we've been holding with all the expenses that incur to make sure that the pipes don't burst from freezing and the heat is on well enough and the mortgage is still being paid and the roof isn't falling apart. When we sell a church, 15% of the sale goes to the operating budget of the Synod so that mission can happen. Then we take the rest and we clear the expenses that we have been accruing over the years for all the properties that we've had under management. Because just like profits accrue over time, so do debts. And so as you saw yesterday in Janet's presentation, roughly $250,000 of expenses has had to been paid out of our accounts in order to care for these properties until we were able to sell them. The remaining 400 plus is in the fund for mission. It is not the way we want to have ministry continue. We want to be supported by all the contributions from people who see the value of the ministry that we do. But it is a way that we can have the life of St. Luke Dublin continue on in the ministry of the broader church. And so when you see $224,600 as a shortfall, know that we are not going to worry about, gee whiz, are we going to be able to pay the rent, the heat, the bishop? Is she going to have to sit out with a tin cup on the street? No. We will be using funds that we have received for mission. Now, as we go forward, I do not know where the capital appeal, the mission appeal will go. Mission Advancement Campaign. Is that what we call it now? There we are. But it makes sense to me that somehow we raise money to make mission happen. It also makes sense to me that now the economy is turning around, that we can all take the opportunity to encourage our councils and our congregation. And I know how hard this is because my council and congregation aren't always excited either. Some are really behind me, and others are accountants. Please forgive me, all you accountants in the room, especially Janet behind me. But this is less than 10% of our budget. And we really have the ability to pay this ministry out of the resources that we have. And so the curiosity is that hand putting the money in, or is it taking it out? With that as background, the budget is before you, and the details are in that section, the treasurer's and budget proposal. Are there questions?
Microphone number 2.
John Carlson, almost retired.
Still trying to.
Still trying. Someone correct me, but there is no church in Corinth anymore. There is no church in Thessalonica. There is no church in Philippi. But as we heard from the 50th year people, they served ably so that we can serve now. Yes, there will be churches that close. Yes, there will be places that we will say, the ministry has been completed there. We now move on. We are in the 21st century, dealing with 21st century issues, and we will be okay because of the work that's been done previously and because we're going to prime the pump. Thank you.
Any other comments? No one's coming to the microphone.
We call for a vote.
So this budget was presented by the Synod Council. So you're ready to vote? If you are in favor of the proposed 2015 budget, you will raise your green cards. Wait a minute. If you are opposed, you'll raise your red cards. Please vote now. Green cards. Put them down, please. Red cards. It looks like the vote unanimously passed. Money as you thought.
There we are.
That's Janet's birthday present. Thank you.
Thank you, all you accountants.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we ask Jill Moiser to come up for reference in council.